can I ask how your thesis went? How your day went, Molly?
Yeah, it went great. I passed. Your advice really helped.
Boom! That's all we wanted to hear.
Okay, let's get started, guys. Welcome to the Sid City Social Club for Tuesday, May 4th. It's May 4th, guys. May the 4th be with you. Today we have a special guest. We've got Liam O'Donnell, who wrote Skylines with Sid. We're really excited. We've got several people who have questions for him, but first I'm going to send it over to Sid.
Thank you. Well, if it's May the 4th today, then it'll be Revenge of the 5th tomorrow. There you go. I get it. Hi, everybody. I'm still in my little hotel room in Sydney, overlooking the harbour, which is a very cool view, but it's getting a little old. I haven't worn shoes. I just realized that yesterday. I have not worn shoes since I arrived in Australia. Well, since I got off the plane. I was like, I just saw some shoes on the floor over there. I was like, when am I going to wear shoes? Maybe next week. It's enough of a mission just to put on pants, which I have, by the way. It's not going to be one of those Zoom moments. Super excited to have Liam here, who is just beautiful, you know. And it's really nice to see him again. It's really lovely to see you all. So I think we should just get cracking. And obviously, if I've forgotten to say anything about my quarantine, I will get it interjected if it's amusing enough. So yeah, let's just jump in with both feet.
Okay, so we're gonna go over to Casey, who I've heard that you liked this movie a little bit.
Okay, so this movie is my jam. This is great.
Okay. Great.
Casey, you're brilliant.
Hi.
Hi, sweet.
I'm really excited to ask questions to Mr. O'Donnell.
Okay.
Hi.
Ask away.
I don't know if Sid's seen me this nervous before.
No, I'm offended.
Hi. Yeah. I saw the tweet and made a very annoying sound of excitement, and then sent a big old list of questions to Mel. The first one I know was I was watching a movie and I was really interested to see how much of, especially the pilots, how much of that was CG versus in camera. And the practical effects are great, like the suits and everything. I was just wondering if you had like a preference for CG versus in camera stuff, or if it was like
it's really just what each version can do. The suits are obviously great to work with, and I love having the actor in the scene with you, you know, and our actor Jeremy Fitzgerald, who's kind of our main suit guy for Trent. He has a lot of personality, and he has got really good training and can I've done 2 movies with him at this point, so we have a really good shorthand about what I'd like him to do in each scene. So that's always great because that saves me from like talking to an animator, right? But and not that I don't enjoy working with them, but it's really like he can only move so fast on those stilts. He can't really like jump through the air and punch something in the head. So there's like that scene, you know, where he comes to the rescue of Rose and she's on their back. You can kind of see in that fight like what the CG does well, which is jump through the air fast. And then what the suit does well afterwards, he gets up and he starts slapping them around like Three Stooges, like, you know, like he's like smacking everybody and knocking heads off. Like that's all fun. So it is really just about figuring out what you want per shot and what's going to work there. I didn't have to replace his legs with CG, which if you saw the previous movie, there's a lot of like legs and they're kind of swimming around because you end up thinking like, oh, we're just going to replace this tiny little bit. It'll be fine. But once you start doing it, like it slides and it doesn't fit the hips. And then it's such a headache. You end up cutting the whole waist off of the thing and replacing the bottom half with fully CG animation. And you're like, so I would definitely prefer in camera, but you know, CG is a tool that helps you get specific behaviors.
The one that I was supposed to ask you is about lighting, apparently. So sorry, I just really I love that you directed it, but you also wrote it, and I'm fascinated by people who can like come up with things, just create stuff from their brain.
There's a lot of sci-fi gobbledygook in this movie. Yes, that's
I mean, it hits a lot of really classic beats. It's awesome. Like you're on the planet right away. It's very Aliens too. Like
yeah,
you're just, like there, and then you're in the action. And anyway, so I heard you speak in a different interview about how you went for a really bright, colorful look for the lighting because you knew that people were going to be watching it in a different format. They weren't going to be in like the dark movie theaters.
yes.
And I was just, could you talk about that a little bit? Would it have?
Yeah, well, it absolutely. So the first movie I ever worked on, which I got pretty lucky that like right out of college, I hooked up with these directors and I helped them on their pitches for stuff. And I ended up helping with their pitch to get Aliens versus Predator 2. And it wasn't shot that way. It was shot by a really great DP, Daniel Pearl. And they ended up getting issues with the DI. And it was like they were riding like a line and they went way far over it. And so like if you mess with your settings, you can watch it kind of correctly, but it still was a better movie than what the finished product was. So I noticed that that's like, it's a DP thing. So then in the second movie, that the first one I did with Christopher Probst, like there were some scenes that we would do really dark and moody, like in the subway tunnels. And I found myself having to lift it a lot. And I don't like the way that was. So it was really just those lessons of like, everyone was still kind of shooting for the theater. And I'm looking at this one as like, okay, but I went through the process of Beyond Skyline and I saw it in like 12 different theaters around the world, but it was, people are going to be watching this on phones and iPads and everything. I wanted like a really like bright, crisp, glossy image that popped because, you know, you're competing with so many other things. And I would say that in post in the DI and in the VFX, and it would like break people's hearts because like they don't want to hear it, but it's just the truth, you know. Like everyone's like, it's like, dude, we're not making this movie for like the handful of festivals that it's going to play. We're making it for the streaming audience. That's where people are going to discover it. So let's try to, you know, have this thing so that it doesn't just play on like one setting of a TV. It's like, oh no, it looks really good, but you got to turn your smart sync off and all that stuff. I was like, I just want this thing to be a more durable image that is going to last longer. That's the other interesting thing about working on like a trilogy over 10 years is that you kind of see how things age and where they find their audiences and stuff. And you get a longer perspective on each film. It's not really about the initial release anymore either. It's like it'll get rediscovered, it'll come off of streaming for a few years, and then it'll come back on, and it'll be a whole other new audience. It's kind of wild.
It's true. Well, as someone who had a heck of a time trying to figure out like the first couple of Fallout games, like what was in the background and the foreground. Thank you.
Yes.
Yes. This movie is really funny. And Sid, you're hilarious in it.
He is hilarious.
Right?
My commentary, I was like cracking up, laughing about it, and I was like, I wonder how many people know that I think this is funny or not. Because I you know, every time we do it afterwards, I try to stifle my laughter so that the actors don't see it behind the monitor. But I'm always kind of, you know, cracking up, especially, you know, when he's really chewing the scenery and doing the big villain monologues. I was just like, you know, pinch me.
Liam has he just interjects while you're performing, you know, go huge, go big or go home.
Yeah, it was, no, I'd say like, you know, I thought like you'd always have, obviously when you're directing Sid, it's like first takes good, it's great, you're done. So you kind of feel like you have to justify your existence by giving him notes. So I'd be like a little bit more delicious. And he's like, I know exactly what you mean. And then goes in and he did exactly what I meant.
Or a little more Oppenheimer.
Yeah,
that was a huge one.
There's one thing that I should put online, but it was like, we nailed this really quick scene where, Daniel Bernhardt's character brings back the big Cadbury cream egg and he gives it to Sid. And we just had like a whole end of the day and it was like done in one shot. Like you see the scene, it's like three shots. It's really nice and easy, but we had the time. So I just started being like, let's go bigger. And there's these amazing takes where Sid, I don't know if you remember this, where you just like Z is asking about his dead girlfriend. He's like, Alexi, and you're like, G, get this man some rest, and like implying that he's a man, he is not. And it was whoa, it was crazy. And it was part of me that wanted to put it in the movie, but it was like we weren't there yet. You know, we were still kind of building up to the where he's like yelling about Trent and Violet. So I didn't want to jump the gun, but it was an amazing take.
I got a chance to really channel my uncle Malcolm in that movie. It was great fun.
It was very space cowboy. It was cool.
Yeah.
How do you go for the humor in something like this without it kind of making a parody of itself? I know that you got to go big, but like, where's the line? How can you make it funny without tipping over into goofy?
It's just like what you said. We did takes that were goofy. You know, it's like you kind of have to kind of do it on one side and then do it on the other, and figure out where you want to ride the line to which point, and where it is supporting everything and in that kind of poppy fun thing, and then where it's going to be like, okay, it's too tongue-in-cheek. It is, you know, it's kind of like a dial. It's like the volume dial that you're riding all the way through, like how far either way. And that would be, it was one thing I was nervous about in the first act stuff, that like it was way too serious and I was trying to pull it back, but everyone comes in that first week especially, and they have all their preconceived notions of the way they wanted to do each thing. And so Lindsay was very much like Sarah Connor, fate of the world on my shoulders. And I just was like, we got to find opportunities to pull some of it back and have a sarcastic line or a smile, and just break it so that it's not like we're not getting so self-serious. And so that, it is a thing that you're kind of always in the back of your head through every scene, and like, where's a good place to add some levity? And it can never really be funny enough, but it can't be making fun of itself. I guess that's what the answer is.
That's
Absolutely.
Awesome. That's really cool. My last question is for Sid, I guess.
I guess.
Maybe.
I'm being made fun of for fangirling in the chat.
Ignore them. It's a form of bullying.
I will. The way I phrased it to Mel was between the whiskey, the duster, and the revolver. Your very sinister space general bounding tombstone with a bit of SS. And I was wondering if that was a pre-casting or a post-casting choice.
That was definitely a post-casting choice because I did not know before I was cast what I would do. But a lot of it was Liam, the actual inflections were kind of me, but Liam wrote the lines, and sometimes they were just off, but off enough for me to find something interesting about it, and that became something for me. And often you fight against lines. Not that I had to fight against many of Liam's, but when you do fight against them, that's when some of the most interesting stuff comes out, because a lot of writers will say, "No, I won't let you change a word," and that's when you've got a potential for fantastic stuff. And if you kind of a boring, if you go into yourself and get a bit egotistical about it, and you refuse to have fun with that, then it's going to be terrible. But if you just go, okay, let's go. But Liam would let me change pretty much anything I wanted, but I just didn't feel like I needed to.
I'm going to let other people talk now.
Well, thank you. It was a pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you so much. This
Casey.
was a lot of fun, and thank you for letting me ask crazy questions.
Jump back in if you think of anything you'd like.
Oh gosh, thank you, Casey. She literally emailed me in all caps. Like, I could feel her vibrating through the email.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're brilliant, Casey.
Okay, let's go over to Kieran. Kieran's got a question.
Hey, Kieran.
So
Hi, Kieran.
my basic question is, what would you think was one of your biggest challenges with directing, and how did you overcome that challenge?
The biggest challenge in this one was the schedule, I'd say. It was quite daunting, and there was like so much pressure from the Bond company that if I fell behind a day, unfortunately, the movie before this, I had some scheduling difficulties. Things that could go wrong were going wrong. So I felt like there was a lot of pressure on me to stay on schedule. And so the way that we overcame that was really just being a lot more diligent in my planning and shot listing everything as much as possible, and kind of working, just having the experience of shot a movie before is I was trying to explain this to someone, is that like you think you do storyboards and you think you've done or previs and you're fine for the day, but that's not really the order of the way that you're going to shoot it because of the lighting and the blocking or the actors that you're working with and their schedule and things like that. So it was getting more kind of collaborative and organized with my first AD, with my DP, production design, everyone, so that I would have like a really rock solid plan to get through every day. And that usually up to like 4 a.m. So our call times kept kind of creeping later and later because we're on stage for most of it. So you don't really need to be up at 7 a.m. because, there's no sun when you're on a stage all day. So like by the end of the shoot, our call times were like 11 a.m. and all the crew were quite pissed off about that because like it's like their job, it's not like us where we're in Lithuania, kind of in this summer camp situation, making a movie. Like they're punching a clock and they're going to work at a film set every day and they're trying to go back home to their kids. And I'm making them stay till 11 p.m. So they weren't happy at that for the last week. We kind of started resetting, but we finished ahead of schedule. We actually finished like the last day. We had a half a day and it was them walking down a mountainside and I just kind of had them keep doing it. It was one of those like moments where I'm allowed to be a little proud of myself, I guess, because I really didn't think I thought we were going to go behind at least 3 days. So the fact that we finished and didn't have any reshoots or anything was definitely
that's very cool. Can you touch on something I'd love to unpack, because I don't think people get it when we talk about in films, because people talk about schedules and stuff. Now, when you write a script, you sell the idea, you maybe pre-sell a few markets, you learn what your budget is, you have an idea at the beginning, and then it changes, and you end up with the budget you end up with.
Yeah.
So, assuming you have like $1 million to spend, X doesn't matter what the number is. Your budget is basically 30 into $1 million if it's a 30-day shoot.
Right.
And that includes food and actors, not really actors. Well, most actors. Some actors are they call above the line. They're not in the budget, that budget. But let's assume that pays for the movie. So when you go a day over, you've basically losing money that you cannot get back. Is that right? And that's why the Bond people, the insurers, get upset.
Right. Yes. And every shoot day is on a movie like this in Lithuania, I'd say it was, but yeah, like let's just say every shoot day is $100,000, then you're adding that to the budget. So exactly, it's kind of, it is more within the labor costs. So at a movie, like ours, it was probably less than that. But like if you're shooting, like a music video in LA, it's like it's ridiculous daily shoot costs. When you're doing action like us, it's that those pages are completely different. You can actually bang out 8 pages of dialogue in a day, but you'll get like a quarter of a page of action. So that's where the push and pull was. And I had never worked with a second unit before, but that proved to be super helpful and useful for us, especially the guys did a great job. And it was like, because we have creatures, we'd shoot the creature on the second unit, and it all kind of cut together and it worked. But that was a learning process as well.
Really?
Kind of, another layer of organization where you're like, okay, I'm going to shoot all this side of a scene, and then someone else is shooting this side. I hope it works out, but
yeah.
It did. Yeah.
I think people don't get the fact that, the money just doesn't equate to the way the film's shot. They seem to be dislocated, and people should understand that there's a strict budget. And what you're doing is basically starting a business that costs X $1 million. agreeing to fold it in just a month's time, which is kind of a
Yes.
bizarre concept. So you're building a hospital you're going to tear down, but the memory of that hospital is going to go somewhere else and be a hospital for other people, which is what's so complicated about the finance structure of films and why they're so difficult to make. And young filmmakers have to really understand what they're going to try and how they're going to try and sell it almost before they write it. Yeah, that's another fascinating conversation. But let someone else ask another question, because I'm just hogging.
I actually had a part two. Since
good.
Since you Sid there brought up about budgeting and about scheduling being your biggest thing. So time frame, making sure that you don't, like you said, you ended this project a few days early.
Hours early.
Do you feel pressured? Like, for example, on your next project, do you think there'd be pressure for you to meet a same type of a timeline?
There's filmmakers of a certain level that they don't have that same pressure, and it's on a bigger budget production. But those are like few and far between. Like, and a lot of those guys are great at making their days. That's kind of why they're so successful. So. Like I mean, Sid could talk more about Ridley Scott, but he's kind of famously, is like this incredible shooter who gets on a footage and doesn't go really over.
Never goes over.
But yeah.
All right, Stephanie, let's get your question.
Hello. I have two questions. The first one is for Liam. So when you're writing the scripts, do you have it like visually, like down to the makeup and costuming and the set, or does that all come later?
God, no. Yeah, no. There's like always a certain geography, but the writing part 4 right now, and it's like I always feel like that first draft is like having a flashlight in the dark, like trying to figure out. I'm not really a vomit draft guy. I like to go slower and have it all make sense to me, but I'm trying to do that on this one. And there's certain challenges to it, because then I feel like you just write really dialogue heavy and not action visual. But there's certain things that are almost exactly, the way you're thinking it. And then there's other ones that are complete discoveries. And like you're collaborating with so many people on a film like this. And I'm not one of those guys that's like, oh, I came from production design, or I came from cinematography. So I really am only as good as my collaborators there and what they're going to bring and what we can, figure out. So a lot of the stuff was like, hey, I know how we can do this for the money, and then let's see how we can put it together. And then there's even things like, hey, we're in this place in Lithuania and they just shot Chernobyl here. They have all these tents, like they have all these Soviet tents for the tent village. Like, do you like the canvas tent? And I was like, well, I'd like it now. It's like it's found materials. Indie filmmaking. A lot of the spaceship too. It was like our initial concepts were a little sleeker, a little more cutting edge, and then they're like, we have all this Soviet, nuclear reactor GAC from Chernobyl. It's just sitting underneath the studio. You can repurpose all that, and we're like, okay, well that kind of makes sense. We're post-apocalyptic. It's like things aren't going to be looking like it's out of a Mac store after the apocalypse. So yeah, maybe there is a little bit more, and we had fun with that. But that's definitely, part of the realities and the stuff that comes at you in production, rather than sticking to be like, no, I have a vision. Cause that's just not the reality of this kind of level of indie filmmaking.
That's kind of interesting, because sorry to interrupt, because I know there's going to be another follow-up question, but so there is, you as a director and a writer at the same time are having to disassociate your writer from your director, because the director has to deal with rewriting scripts on the fly, with tents, with Chernobyl sets. The writer doesn't do that. Writer just gets the hell out of Dodge when they're finished and sometimes is asked to rewrite a scene. So
Right.
you're constantly juggling between the two. So do you have to get rid of scenes that you love or ideas or structures that you love as a writer in order to accommodate you as a director?
Yes, absolutely. And it's one of the reasons why I look forward to working with other writers, because I'm so disrespectful of myself as a writer that I'm like, oh, well, that guy doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. And I'll just, tear it up. And it'd be great to work with someone who would be like, no. And I'm like, oh, right. Thank you. But yeah, there's definitely that process the whole time. And I do try to prepare other writers because I have a lot of writer friends that are like, a couple years younger than me, in their early 30s, and they're starting to get things like produced and get made. And I'm producing a few of them. And I try to prepare them for how many drafts they're going to have to do in the movie. Because unless it's like this amazing Tarantino level perfect script, like there's going to be all these little adjustments that we're going to need all the way through. And you have to let go of this.
Yeah.
Oh, the spaceship design in my head was this, and now it's that. It's like, well, does it look good, and does it work, and is it functional? Is it going to sell everything that you need? Great. And, we'll figure out how to arrange the furniture, but you have to really take advantage of those type of little happy accidents that come along the way. Absolutely.
Sorry, second part of your question.
Well, this one's for Sid. So I've been getting a lot of different schools of thought, method acting, not method acting. So I was wondering, do you do method acting? And if so, how do you not go crazy? Because I've tried it in the past and I've gone crazy.
Well, there's a line in a famous song, I don't care how you get here, just get here if you can. And that's pretty much how acting works. And method acting, or Lecoq in the French style, or the Polish style, Grotowski, or you name it. All the different styles are out there. It doesn't matter. It honestly doesn't matter. You do what you want and what works for you. I personally don't think method acting is very healthy. Having been through, years and years ago, the school that try to teach us a bit about everything, and then meeting young actors over the course of my career who are adopting it, because it takes you out of the real world into a kind of weird semi-real world that is supposed to be real, that you're imagining. Because once you place the idea of add emotional recall, that you're going to need this one day to everything you do, then you stop existing. A tragedy might befall you, a family member might die, and you, as an actor, are somehow going, "Ooh, I can use this," and that is so wrong.
Oh no, I've had really toxic theater teachers be like, "You just gone through a tragedy, good, use it," and I'm like, "What?"
That is not a thing. You do not use those. You do not use your human experience that way. You're abusing it if you use it that way, because if you're not if it's not arriving, if you're not remembering it as someone who went through something and got over it, or maybe didn't get over it, then you aren't remembering the human element, and you're just abstracting yourself out of it. So method acting for me doesn't work. There's a technical reason why it's really important to ignore method. Get what you can from it, enjoy that, and move on, and just rely on your technique. That's my 2 cents.
That's good to know. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think it was Robert Pattinson who said, "How come everybody, when they want to do method, it becomes an excuse for being an asshole?"
Yeah.
And no one's like, I'm going to be method as this really nice person and just be nice to everybody. It's always like, no, I'm an asshole, but it's okay because I'm a serious artist.
Yeah.
I've always felt like that too.
Well, I remember on Star Trek, there was a young kid who came on. He wasn't young at the time. He was my age, but in my memory, who came on. He just had one scene to do. He was obviously hyper nervous because it was a break. It was a chance. And he was on a big, a primetime show. He had to just be out of breath. It's simple, because nothing really complicated. He must have run 4 miles before the take.
I've done that too, yes!
In order to be out of breath. And of course,
I couldn't get
he
the
was
line
out
out
of
because
breath.
I was going like, oh God.
But he also hyperventilated and vomited. It was a
I got that
disaster
too.
for him.
Oh my God.
You do need technique. You need technique
Right.
as a painter. You need technique as a potter. You need technique as a fisherman. Who knows
Amazing.
why you don't need technique as an actor? This idea that you can bypass your technique and go straight to the emotion is a fallacy.
I'm crediting you on my resume. You are now my teacher.
Thank you, Stephanie. Those were good questions. Good questions.
Really?
Okay, we're gonna go talk to Zoe. We've got Zoe and her sister and her mom.
I've never met.
Oh, I can't
I've
see
never
you.
met you.
That's my new roommate, Shay. We're all started Deep Space Nine together.
It's such a pleasure to meet you. You look like three sisters. It's wild. It's really cool.
Okay, I have 3 questions, which I hope is okay. And I'll be throwing the first one to Liam. Read a few interviews this morning, and in one you said that people read the script and said it was an $80 million script, and we definitely didn't have that. But we watched it last night, and me and Kay, like, multiple times were like, what was the budget on this thing? Because
it's a great question. I
So-
don't know.
managed to make it feel so huge with a smaller budget.
That's the best compliment you can give a director.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for it's kind of a weird thing, just because of I had a strange way of coming up where I was working within a visual effects company, and so I was kind of writing, developing, and producing with them for like 13 years, and so I kind of know. There's a couple of things, there's a couple of tricks, and there's ways to maximize. But in each movie of these, a visual effects company is like part of the production. So they actually have an equity stake in the movie. So their costs, they'll go in and, the first 2 movies were done by Hydraulics in the US. That was the company that I worked at. And then this one we did lip sync in the UK because this was a UK co-production. And so they'll kind of try to get like money for their labor, and then they put what normally would be their profit as an equity stake so that they try to make money off of the movie, because lip sync is kind of more famous for, I believe they were more famous for commercials, and they wanted more sci-fi stuff on their reel so they could, get Star Wars and stuff. So it's like a mutually beneficial thing that helps for independent movies like this. When a VFX company like Lip Sync that has funds wants to continue growing out their reel and work on different type of projects. It is kind of the way you plan it, and even doing something as crazy as like blowing up a planet in this and like it's like only 5 shots, but it feels like it's a much bigger sequence, And part of that is that like it's a big slow push into on Alexander's face as he's seeing it. So in our mind, we feel like we're seeing the whole thing go, and then we do one shot at the end where you see it coming apart around him. So some of that is sort of, just kind of figuring out how to tell the most amount of story per shot. Another cheat on that is they might be wise to it now, but there's a lot of crash zooms in the CG. And I do that on purpose, so that way I could cut it to 2 shots later if I need to, because they do charge like a rate per shot. So so you'll just save like, a couple, maybe $100,000 if you do that throughout the movie, because literally like you can get the same amount, but then if you were to cut that up into 3 things, they're going to charge a surplus per each shot. So I always tried to do like longer things with more story, and then if I need to trim them or I need to do that, but there's also like if it's like Star Wars, here's another big difference. Like when they're doing their test screenings or even their editing, they get like amazing post-viz and pre-viz, which is kind of like a rough animatic of what the finished visual effects will be. And they have that like all the way through their editing process. But for me, I have very like kind of roughshod pre-viz in some spots and some none. And it's all just in my head and the editors. and then even to the end, I would get like visual effects that went into the movie like that day, and I you couldn't even edit it. Those things that you just, hey, that it's the amount of time we have in the day, and to do it that way and not over edit it and not kind of continually get different visual effects throughout the whole process that are not going to ultimately end up in the movie, but help you, and everybody get their heads around it. That's because they're being made by a bigger room, more people that need to all understand the same thing. Whereas in this case, it was really just me, our editor, Barrett Heathcote, and the producer. There was nobody else. So I could have the benefit of, if someone didn't 100% understand what that blue and glow light was going to do to that blue and glow light, I'd just be like, just trust me, it'll work. And we save a lot of money that way too.
Do you still have any of the previs or some of the sketch work that you might have had for your film?
Yeah.
Because it would be a masterclass to take a couple of seconds long sequences, show the previs, show the early illustrations, and show how you actually constructed the scene and you end up with the end result from these intangible parts at the beginning. Would be a fascinating process to have it broken down, to see the sausage factory.
Yes.
It would be really fascinating.
No, we tried to do a little of that on the making of doc that we did. That it's on the Blu-ray and it's on Apple iTunes if you buy it on iTunes.
Okay.
The Apple version has a bunch of it, but it's just you get a little bit of it, but we didn't do exactly what you're saying with the masterclass.
Just interesting to see how, when you talk about cutting up crash zooms and stuff like that, these are tips and tricks of the trade that really are incredibly useful to someone who's starting out.
But they were very good sports, lip sync, and it looks like we're doing another movie together, so they mustn't have hated me too much.
That's great. Well, that's how you bought your 4 hours at the end of the movie.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you think your background in special effects helped you find all those little
Yes. Yeah, it definitely did. And the other real benefit of that company that I grew up working in is that they're like eccentrics, and they would bought their own cameras. And so I was able, on the second movie, this is the third, on the second one, when we're in post, they had like a stage and they had their own cameras. And so I was able to do a bunch of little pickups and get all these little shots that I had missed on the second one, because it was my first time just rushing through everything. And just doing that and editing the second one, I felt like was such a unique opportunity. Like there's all these extra little shots that we just got on the backstage that helped flesh it out. And that helped my brain when I was going into the third one to not miss as many things, and to kind of really think more about those little sort of inserts and POVs and overs that I had to go back and get the next time. I feel like that second movie was such a great experience for me because of all the different things I had to kind of do, that even the VFX background, it's like what anyone says, like the best school is just doing it. I'm one of those for sure.
I have another question concerning the special effects, but from a director standpoint, it's got to be different than directing like an intimate emotional scene. How do you direct something when there's nothing really there, or like what's going on? I want some behind the scenes there.
Okay, what's actually like the hardest scenes to direct in the movie is like the scene where Rose and the group come up to the console, and then they like open the hologram and she walks out onto the catwalk and then comes back and blasts them and jumps off. That's like one of the hardest ones because it's so sci-fi gobbledygook, and people are like, I just could hear myself in third person being like, and then it opens this, which leads on a catwalk to the core drive. And when you blast the core drive, the alarm shoots this blue light back at her, and she turns around, and I could just see everyone's eyes like, like glassing over. And you're like, God, like, I know it's going to work, but they just, it's not like they're watching the other movies on loop. It's a job. So I'm like, okay, those are actually the toughest ones. But the action is actually really fun and easy too, I think. I think it's kind of like you rehearse it, and you have some stunt previs, and it's really kind of a fun thing to get the energy up and to plow through.
Yeah, the hardest thing from an acting point of view is definitely, well, there are two hard things. One is elaborate action sequences, but in very difficult places. So, I mean, thankfully I'm getting old enough now not to have to do too many action sequences. No one really gives a damn about that. But there was a time when I had to do quite a lot. And one, I had to do a sword fight against a bunch of people who were coming downhill at me, but I was going uphill at them. And it was on a real incline. I mean, it was a proper grassy hill. And it exhausted me the first time, because obviously you're doing various moves and killing 8 people, and stuntmen are dying all around you. But you're running uphill and your quads start to burn. And then the director goes, "That's great, let's do it again." You're like, "Really?" And we do it 8 times. And that is incredibly hard. But then the other hard thing, which is completely the opposite, is very, very intimate scenes with, this is specific, with directors who are tone deaf, which happens quite a lot. So a director who, this is obviously, Liam isn't part of this, but a director who is was trying to make some kind of movie, but there is a love scene kind of in the middle of their movie, but that's not the movie they want to make, but it's there. They want to make sort of, a genre movie of some kind, and they're very good at that. But then they come to the love scene, and you are dealing with this other person you are in love with and having an intimate scene with. And that can be sex, or it could be all sorts of different things. But they can't hear the truth in your voice, or they're not listening. And so they just talk technique, and you're trying to deal with things that are big, and they got cameras here. It's like, really, I've just got to, and that's really tough, when they swing the camera around in a kind of macho way and they're missing your performance. They're very difficult.
How did you approach playing a character where you knew more than the audience did, and you kind of had to fool the audience? How did you approach that? That was
a total trust in Liam, that he would be okay. He would hold all the cards back, because you kind of give stuff. You give him everything, every scene. So if he wants to change the reveal to the beginning, he can. I mean, it's right there. If he wants to use an inflection, because you give him 3 or 4 different takes, and they're very different inflections and very different tones. And sometimes he would ask me to be aggressive early, and I'd be like, I'm not sure I want to give away that yet.
Right.
But in the end, you give it, and you know that he's going to be able to deal with it later. But he just wants the options. Would you say that's probably about right, Liam?
Yeah, I mean, there's a deleted scene that I did put in the deleted scenes, which is where you and Lindsay had the argument in the hallway. We're coming down the hallway, and she's like, "There's got to be an easier way," and you were like, we have 3 days. You are the only way. And your kind of mask slipped a little bit, and and I loved it. And she you're kind of like, you just become like the authoritarian is like, there, like, don't cross anymore. And then she walked away from you, and then you were like, "Rose," and you're kind of coming after her and trying to make up for it a little bit in the next scene.
I remember that. Yeah.
And it worked. It worked really well, but it was also like, we're trying to we're trying to tighten the movie as much as possible. And it was just one of those ones where I was like, if we don't have this moment, and we kind of made it more about the scene afterwards, we felt like we maybe didn't need both. And the other one, it had to happen there. And so by getting rid of that was like you said, like, if it was in there, I think you would have been like, "Oh, this guy's got a dark side," or, it's like, you just kind of have to adjust and figure it out within the edit. Yeah.
But in answer to your question, you are very aware of it, acting, and you are trying very hard to lead the audience astray, because that's a major plot point for the movie.
Well, you had me totally fooled.
I'm really glad. Thank you. And I apologize, but I'm really glad.
But then what's he hiding?
The general paid for it in the end, though.
Yeah, a little bit.
That's maybe Sid's best on-screen death scene. I mean,
that's another thing about method acting.
Really
Try
good.
Method acting death.
I mean, someone did ask you about your inspiration for that, and we got an incredible GIF of you pretending to be a child, pretending to be eaten by a shark, I believe is how it was.
Yes.
Yes. Elmi's got a question.
Elmi, welcome back.
Yeah,
it's lovely to see you.
Thank you. You too, actually,
Hurrah.
and everybody. I have questions for both you and Liam. I watched the Skylines 3 a few days ago. Absolutely loved it. It was like the most interesting and exciting thing that I watched. And it said, I don't know what you mean. You said something like it's a movie where you switch your brain off, and I'm like, that's not true.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
it made my brain light up.
Oh, well,
Yeah,
that's
good,
nice.
good.
Thank you.
It's the thing that struck me the most was just the fact that every single department that worked on this movie seemed to be working in complete harmony. I absolutely love the lighting design, the fact that there's so much storytelling done with the lighting. I saw like a moral shift happen with just the lighting alone. I loved that.
That's incredibly observant.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
The ship and the world design was amazing. What I did exactly what Casey did, and I typed an email to Mel in all caps. What I described the ship and world design as gorgeously disturbing. And it was, I didn't want to look away from it, but it was like, I didn't want to look at it, but it was so interesting that I couldn't look away. Yeah, this movie, I want to compare it to Pacific Rim, Rogue One, and Tron Legacy. And Tron Legacy is my #1 favorite movie of all time. And like this, I think this was just, it was just one of the best things that I've seen in a really long time. Like I want to say almost a year, if not longer.
That's fantastic.
Yes.
Just I literally have notes of all the things I love. So the world building and the character building and the pacing were just working so much in sync, and like you couldn't get lost because it's like there was just enough of everything. What I loved was that the characters were introduced, like you wouldn't see their face first, like you'd see their hands, you'd see like a bit of their setting, you'd see like a bit of their surroundings, and like you'd hear their voice first. So you get a sense of the character before you see their face. So it's almost like you're not judging based on their appearance, and you're seeing the character first. And I love that.
Oh.
Did you not notice?
No.
So you did that.
I really like to do the voice first, but I didn't think of it as not judging based on appearance. It's more, it's like a stylistic thing. It's a stylistic. I like, it always makes me lean forward. So it's just a little bit of a trick that I like when I'm watching movies. It's fascinating that's the takeaway. I like that.
It happened in 2 scenes consecutively. So it was Colonel and then Radford introduced, and like the same thing happened with both. And it was then I thought back and I realized the same thing happened with Rose at the start of the movie.
I think it happens with Leon too, when he walks up to the campfire, now that you said it.
Yeah.
So,
I took a screenshot, so I'm going to put it in the chat. So this was my favorite shot of the whole movie.
That's high praise indeed. And Elmi is a particularly gifted writer.
Oh, this shot, of Mr. James Cosmo. I love this shot too.
I mean, particularly in sci-fi, there's a woman who's the lead. I guess like woman of color, and the fact that she survives to the end. I mean, I guess that's a more popular thing that's happening now. But one thing I specifically love is that there was no romance in this.
That was not, I mean, Jonathan tried to make it happen. He lobbied quite often. Like he was like, look, I know my character is in love with Rose, but how does she feel about me? And we just laugh.
It doesn't work. It's a sibling story. It is. There's the sibling parallel, like that was what made me cry every single time that it came up. It was the parallels between the siblings. And the fact that there was like when Trent got that blue light thing and Rose is trying to snap him out of it, the one who snaps him out of it is Leon. And like that is, it switches the narrative. So they become brothers at that point. Like that's what that was. And I love that so much.
Oh, it's so sweet.
Lindsay did something that very few actors can do, especially given that she's a woman, and she's got the lead in this big, action-heavy sci-fi. She really is a believable hero, when she's fighting, when she's loving. I mean, it doesn't really matter which way around she goes. To have that rounded nature is really, really unusual. I mean, I said in a couple of interviews, people have tried that before by wedging famous actors into heroic roles they just weren't capable of pulling off. And Lindsay does it with aplomb.
The romance thing is funny because I just feel like we're more attuned to like the time of a movie. Like her and Leon kind of only know each other for 3 days in this movie. It's like, it's just not that realistic that you're going to be like, I'm in love with you. So, I think that stuff kind of is one of those holdovers from some of the throwback stuff that that I love, but it feels like it's too big of a push. Whereas within the moment, like the fact that they were so at odds at the beginning, just the fact that they could become friends at the end was a plenty big enough arc for me.
I completely agree.
Me
and
too.
I love that it's a pretty violent film, but I love that it doesn't linger on the violence. Like it's just snapshot, and like even on like things that hurt emotionally, it's not
sadistic.
Yeah, exactly. You're not trying to manipulate the audience into, oh, like it's a sad moment now, be sad now. It's like this audience knows it's sad. Like they can still be hurt by it, and like it's like you're going along with the characters. You're not.
No, I really am not, and it's one of those things where even when I watch some of the movies that in the martial arts genre that are like super gory and sadistic, I can watch them once, but I find I don't go back and watch them enough as like more like like Big Trouble in Little China I've seen like 50 times, like it's like you get some rough stuff in there and it hurts, but it's not like an endurance test in human mutilation.
Yeah, Casey just said in the chat, he's not underestimating the audience's intelligence. I think that's exactly what I told Mel. It's like you're knowing that the audience has emotional intelligence.
Oh,
well, and
this is the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me. Very, very sweet. I have to learn how to take compliments better. I'm like, my eyes are wandering. I don't know where to go.
I absolutely love the soundtrack. I just had the credits on repeat. I mean, it does remind me of the Tron Legacy soundtrack by Daft Punk. Like that's what I love that. I have that on vinyl.
I love that soundtrack. And we have a couple synth tracks that aren't on the soundtrack.
I love the soundtrack too, by the way. I love the fact that it just changed so dramatically with a little bit of thrash metal thrown in from somewhere out of nowhere at one point, and I just really enjoyed the variety that came at me, because it was like the variety that we get in any room. I just love that.
Yes,
I miss variety in movies, and I find those like Jane Austen movies really difficult because everyone looks the same. I like the world is more varied than this.
Right, so that's actually something that I really enjoyed about this movie, is the fact that I usually can't tell characters apart. But this movie, I'm like, I was half an hour in and I'm like, I know all of these characters. I understand them all. And
absolutely. Yeah, I agree totally. I often have the same trouble.
When you have a script and I guess you're in this phase now, it's like you have a script, you're about to start filming, and you're planning your character, but there's something missing in the script. So like the character is not fully there. Like how do you decide, and what do you decide to put in there? And I specifically want to ask about the consistency of how you've kind of made your characters like occasionally queer, I guess.
I'm really interested, as you know, I'm really interested in that, and you've got to tiptoe into that world as an actor. You can't come guns blazing, or you become niched. you turn into a little box that you live in for the rest of your life. And also people just don't like being shocked, but they like being introduced. It's a very weird dealing with people across the screen with like this, and Liam will know this really well too. Touching people through this medium here is a very gentle and a very intimate process, really. So you can't come barging in with difficult ideas, and you have to assume that some of these ideas are difficult, because I'm learning myself. So I figure out who I am day by day, and then just try and expose that if I can with the next character. And then I look back at other characters like Big Battalions. I was really interested to see that. Gosh, I didn't realize that I was like that, but I've always been the same. I've always been this guy who is really kind of sexually ambidextrous, and that's kind of and one of the things I loved in Skylines, which I'm wondering whether you're going to pick up on another movie, Liam, is especially the pilots. The ambiguity of their sexual nature, the identity of them is very potent and contemporary in terms of the conversation that's happening in the world. And as a sci-fi model, we often, shift these difficult areas onto things that are more complicated. And are you interested in talking a bit more about that and people's, because you did touch on it in Skylines?
Yeah, and it was it's interesting. One of our biggest fans of Beyond Skyline and Skylines is a transgendered young man who that spoke so much to him. And and me being a cisgendered straight white dude is just kind of like, it really opened my eyes in so Beyond Skylines 2017. It's been, I struck up a friendship with him, and we're kind of like, he does a lot of fan art and a lot of fan fiction about it, and it's been sort of my education process on this in a lot of ways. Really kind of feeling that the journey of Trent being in one physical body and then being put into another and having to come to terms with that. And so it's each movie is a bit of a reaction to it. And so, yeah, there is stuff in and then seeing, not to completely shift gears, but then seeing Lindsay's fan base is very vocal about, there's definitely a large LGBTQ, sorry if I'm missing those out, but
it's good. It's fun. I'm glad that there is a large trench of those guys.
A large there. And so they want to see some interesting things with her character. So I've been playing with stuff. Like you said, I try to wade in very carefully and trying to figure it out and see what works. But it is, on its face, these things are still very much, these like action adventures. And it's like but like in the third one where it is this, we sell it to people like turn your brain off action adventure, but there is a lot of interesting things that we talked about underneath the surface that's going on with the pilots and with some of the metaphors at play. And so now it is sort of, I guess it's my job to try to expand that and to look at these different realms. It's not really that groundbreaking to be like, fascism is bad. So I could check that list. We did that. So now it is trying to push into some deeper, weird existential questions. I mean, the fun thing about writing part 4 is that Radford killed all of the shepherds. So I've created a vacuum in the story to bring in some new foes that can have, kind of like pull things in a completely different direction. Yes, that it's definitely something that I have been picking up on and trying to educate myself more about. I think it absolutely is supposed to work at that turn your brain off level. And if you get any more out of it, and like when I meet with wonderful people like you, and you guys are getting those other little layers and picking up on the color science and the lighting schemes and that stuff, it's just it's just incredibly gratifying. But we're definitely aiming to please. It's definitely supposed to be a good time.
It was. Thank you very much. I'm gonna shush now. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Elmi. It's good to see you. Okay, we're gonna talk to Nicole, who has a very interesting question to ask you.
It's for both of you, because as a teacher and a former manager, I love to ask this question about every project because it always gets different answers from the respondents. So Liam, other than the obvious, what do you feel Sid contributed to the project? Like, what did he bring to the team and the production? And Sid, what do you feel you contributed?
The first thing that jumps to my mind is that it's just the level of professionalism, and it's a little bit like he was touching on earlier about technique. And you know, usually whenever you have these ensembles and you have someone like Sid who isn't there in every single day, but whenever he does show up, everybody's eyes are going towards him. You know, that all the other actors are like, you know, they know his reputation and they respect his work ethic, and how he behaves is going to, no matter what I do, is going to dictate like how the day goes in a lot of ways. So the fact that he's like just doing these amazing long, he's off book, he's doing, you know, 5 pages of dialogue, and didn't like throw a fist when the AD said no tea, like he's like that professional. But even like I noticed when we were doing the end day in the spaceship with the big monologue, and like Sid will just generally like, he'll stand next to camera. Like most actors, as soon as I say like, oh, it's a turnaround where we've got to turn, that means we've been shooting this way for a while. You know, if it's just a lens change, they know that that's kind of like sit at your chair and be ready to go again. But if it's a turnaround, you can go get a cigarette, you can go get a coffee. It's going to take us 15 minutes to pull all the lighting and decorate this edge of the set for you to shoot in this way. But he'll sit next to camera and kind of like just be ready to go still. And so those are the type of things that like completely reorientate everyone on the set when the sort of like legendary actor that everybody looks up to and is like, everyone's like, he's the best actor here and he's here to work and he's not fucking about and he's off book. It's like, it just makes my job is just so much easier. You know, I've noticed that more and more. I felt like when I was younger, I was trying to come in on set and make sure everybody's okay and like, oh, is this, you know, are you comfortable and all that? But it is really about you know, hiring great people, and they are there to work, and that all takes care of itself. So you kind of have to do the homework and be like, is this person a monster? Yeah, don't hire them. but when you have it, like, that was what was so great about this movie, is that everybody was, there was no real big ego situation at all. And people were having fun and were coming to work. But yeah, it is like, that's the first thing that popped to my head when you say it, like just the sheer professionalism, both from the quality of his acting, but then also just the way he treated every single person on set.
That's really sweet. That's a lovely thing to say. I think I'm going to throw it back at you, but the director really does set the tone, and some of them are very, you know, they're very angst ridden. They're incredibly anxious, and or they have an enormous paranoia about various things. And that is incredibly contagious on a set, because a set, although it may have between 40 or 50 people, as in this movie, or 250 people in another movie, is a very enclosed, intimate space. And we're all on top of each other more time than we're with our families, more time than we're with at home, because we usually spend 13 hours on set, 11 hours at home, and then there's some travel time. But 13 hours on set is, you have to be there, because you get 1 hour for lunch and 12 hours shooting. And if anybody's not okay, it goes like wildfire, and that just costs time, because it eventually goes to the actors, and the actors are really important in this, because the actors start to go, I don't want to do this right now, I'm going to go for a walk, I can't do this scene right now, I need half an hour. All sorts of strange sort of behavior that really causes trouble, that goes all the way up. It's like a sort of a problem in your ankle that just ends up causing you to be paralyzed in your whole body. And basically actors and a director will do that. Mm-hmm. No one else really has the power to do that on set. And only a few actors, some actors just get fired. You know, obviously you can't always be a prima donna. You just end up not being there the next day. But directors can't be fired, and stars of a movie can't be fired. So it's really important that we behave like we're in someone else's house, and that we're really good guests, and that we turn up to dinner on time, and that we try and eat the peas that we don't really like. You know, we just do it.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah. That's basically, I mean, we are. And then, but I see myself as an actor because I have a football analogy, soccer analogy, if anybody's has an idea about soccer. There are strikers, they're the guys at the front who are there to score goals and get all this glory. And Lindsay is a striker in this particular movie, Rose. And it'll be, you know, whatever the star is of the day in other movies. And they usually last a day, but in the archaeological calendar. But I like to see myself as a sort of creative midfielder, kind of spreading passes around to make sure that other actors get something great when they can go and get a goal. And that's basically my role. And I hope to stay that. It's a classic supporting actor role. It's a character actor role. And that's how I would define myself. But I'm very grateful to Liam for saying that my professionalism is nice. That's absolutely what I like.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Nicole. All right. I think we've got Dana.
I have a question for both of you. So, do you have any advice on how to climb in the filmmaking industry, especially if you live in a country or a place where it's not really supported? So,
good question.
Yes. So you're living in a country where it's not well supported, and have you gone to school? Have you shot things yourself? I see even being part of a community like this seems like it feels like you're doing the right thing, which is you're trying to find people, and I still do this too myself, but I think it's a human instinct is to try to look up and be like, help me, pull me up. But you really have to look around to people like in the same place as you and like lock hands and start going forward together. You know, like I moved out here with a friend, and he was a really talented visualist, and I was an okay writer, and we kind of were paired together because he could open doors. And then once he opened the doors, I could close things. And I don't think I would have made it on my own because there's just so many other writers out there. But I had this great partnership with him, and he's directing now as well. But so that's my first thing, is that I always feel like when someone will like DM me and be like, oh, can I write the next Skyline movie? And it's like, well, no, because that's how I make my money. Like but you need to write your Skyline movie. And I feel like that initial instinct to try to, you will get there, but like find your people and your tribe, and whether or not it's in your country or it's online in a community like this, it's people that are going to read your stuff and give you the feedback and be honest with you, or people that are going to want to shoot something with you. Because again, for me, I'm just a learn by doing guy, and I generally a jump off the building and make the parachute on the way down type of person. So like we would just shoot a bunch of things and they were terrible, but it was that then you realize, okay, next time we're going to figure this stuff out here before we go into the desert and shoot this movie. So there was a lot of that experimentation in my 20s with really kind of no budget filmmaking with my friends, and those lessons helped get things made at a bigger level where you'd start to, okay, I can show this to people, and you start to reach up. But I think that initial thing of like finding a crew and a tribe is very important.
Whereabouts? I mean, where not geographically, but whereabouts in your career are you? Have you started writing? Have you started shooting things? Do you have a group around you?
Yes, with my friends, but I'm studying animation and VFX, but we have like films, things, and subjects and stuff. But I'm actually a writer. That's what I enjoy the most. Actually, I have a little question for Liam. Like, do you have any advice for when you are doing a pitch? It's really difficult for me because I get really nervous.
Yeah,
So
me too.
yeah, any advice for pitching? It's
unfortunately, the only advice is that you have to keep doing it until you get a little like, because I was terrible. I've blown some big pitches in my career. Like I think one of the worst ones I had, I was like in a room with like 3 other directors. You know, one director was a producer and they're doing, and I'm like, yeah, like the nervous writer. And I'm like, and then like my voice is cracking and they just kept jumping in on me. And they're like, it's going to be great. It's going to be this. And then you'd lose your place. You know, I've heard people say one of the good advice was like to try to pitch the movie like you're telling your friend you just saw a great movie. And they said, well, what happens in it? And you kind of give them that 45-second version. But you know, I've also been and done the bigger pitches where you kind of have to go in with an exec or a producer and you're giving a more involved, longer story. And the more confident and like controlled you are, the more likely you're gonna sell it, or if not just sell it, that they're gonna like you and call you back for something else, right? Because it isn't necessarily always about that thing on the day. It's the longer one. So just like interviews and Q&As and stuff like this, like you just kind of keep doing them and you get better and more comfortable. It really does come down to like doing the work and memorizing it as hard as you can so that when you come in the room, you're comfortable with it. It's like any kind of oral report. It is a performance. It is, unfortunately, a lot of directing and writing does involve acting. Sorry to say.
I know that. So do you have any advice to calm down in these moments? Because
the simplest, off the top of my head, and Liam will know more about this than I do, but you've already started the right way, and rehearsing is a really good way to do it, to pitch it to friends, to say, ask me questions, be tough on me. That's the easiest, but that gets you going. And then eventually to teachers. Rehearsing it is a really good way. And also to figure out that to reassure yourself that you know your material. I know that we're trying, our little production company's pitching to a bunch of TV broadcasters in America next month, but they're rehearsing it already. They're actually rehearsing it in front of other people. And this is in real life. So they're rehearsing pitches for other things. So just familiarity will make you much more comfortable.
Thank you so much.
You know what? That's actually what you just did is a really good thing. And I actually started doing that in the mornings because, again, I was saying how when I started directing the first time, I was so nervous that I felt like a party host. And I was very like nervous that the actors wouldn't be having a good time. And and they can feel that energy and they feel put upon. They're kind of like, dude, like go do your movie. I'm here to work. And so if I were feeling that, or if I'm not feeling great about a scene in the morning, I will come into the makeup room and I'll talk to the actor and say, I'm really nervous about today. I'm a little thing. And that usually when you do that with someone, I mean, especially someone like Xander, but even everybody that it usually calms them down, and their goal is then to make you feel relaxed. So when you come into a pitch meeting, you'd be like, I just a preference. I get really nervous at these. I'm going to make my way through it. It immediately lets the people know that they want to kind of help you. And it's a nice little technique that I started using quite a bit, so that, because I would just be like, I'm just going to be emotionally honest on this. And that way everyone's going to know, and we'll get through. And I don't need to have this hang up that like, is everybody okay? Really, is everybody having a good time? It's like, no, it's a job. Really some people are going to be in a bad mood sometimes, and some days are going to be more fun to do than others. But if you, we're never fooling anybody with our emotions, right? Like everybody can read the energy all the time. So you're doing yourself like, you're doing everybody a great service to just be honest and say, this is how I'm feeling. And it's probably going to put you at ease and to put them at ease.
When you have a script and you want to show it to a producer or to a company or whatever, that you want to send it, do you send the script like that, or do you send what documents do you send?
Good.
It depends. It depends. Like sometimes you do a deck, like an art deck that has concept art, but that's expensive. You know, you have to use, it's either time if you're a great artist and you can do the art yourself, or if you're like me, I have to hire great artists to do my ideas. So like an original thing, like there's a couple projects that are like world building and stuff like that, or like the first Skyline. We had to do it for the Skyline sequels. It was less of an issue because the worlds all kind of existed, and you could just kind of use some of the images from the other movie. But we also would do like rip-o-matics, where we'll rip the footage from other films and kind of cut together what we feel like the finished product will look like. I always like to have type of audio visual thing if I can, but sometimes it is just the script, and it has to speak for itself.
Yeah, I mean, generally you don't send the script first because most people don't have time to read it, but you have to get them excited with 2 pages. So 2 pages is, you set yourself a limit of 2 pages, right? Starting off, if you have no resume to look at, there's nothing anybody can go to. And from those 2 pages, you really want to get as much flavor as you can of what you're doing into those 2 pages. And then you have, along with those 2 pages, you send like 12 pages, which if people like the first 2 pages, they can open the 12 pages. And then if they read the 12 pages, you get a lot of background character on the act, who the characters are, I mean, background information on the characters, a lot of the world information. So you go from a haiku poem to an essay, and then you give them the script. And you can give them all at the same time, and they can choose to open them as they will please if you want. Especially starting out, it's like, this is the first thing you look at, and then this is the second thing, and this is the third thing. But you need to be very good at getting a lot of information into 2 pages first. So because you have to assume that most people just don't have time to read more. And on those 2 pages, you may have some beautiful photograph, a couple of beautiful lines of poetry that you really speak to your project. Maybe some things the characters have said, and a really beautiful picture of who your characters are, like 2 or 3 sentences about each character. And of course the story, they call that the log line. Mm-hmm. And you do those sort of things. So you start small and expand. And it's actually very hard to write the small 2 pages. It's easy to write the 24 pages, the 12 pages. So you want to reduce and reduce, like cooking, like just keep reducing that stock into the most important elements.
Well, thank you so much.
Amy, did you actually want to ask that question? Or?
Yeah. I mean, I think it came up on Twitter in a discussion after we watched it. So I was just wondering if there had been any thought into putting, Darth Maul robot legs for General Radford in part 4.
Yeah, I remember this interaction, and I was like, I didn't do the shot, but if his body fell on the floor, that means when the wall started, his pieces had to have hit that wall and disintegrated into stardust. So there are flashbacks in part 4. So schedule permitting, I'd love to have Sid come and do some scenes with in our flashback scenes, because it's funny, it's part 4, but like these aren't real sequels. Like I kind of did a different thing each time, but now it feels like I have to actually write a real sequel, and it's hard. So it is like I'm trying to connect all of these different adventures into this one behemoth, and connect the timelines and stuff. So yeah, we'll see. You should give one of your characters in the next movie a little vial of a little test tube of General Radford's stardust, and he just walks around with it and just goes. And people are saying, "What are you doing with General Radford's stardust?" But I just put it in people's drinks to poison them. He comes up in the dialogue quite a bit. You kind of get a little bit famous when you blow up a planet. He's kind of famous within the world. People have strong opinions about you after you do that. Armageddon, not so much.
Oh my gosh. So there's an actual chance that General Radford returns Ish.
We do have
Yes.
a birthday shout out, don't we?
Evil
as well.
twin.
We do.
We'll get that in.
Oh gosh. Okay, Megan, would you like to follow that with a birthday shout out?
Well, listen. Do you want to hear what it sounds like when people from all over the world say happy birthday to you on Zoom?
Sounds good.
Then this is what it sounds like, Megan. Happy birthday!
Happy birthday!
Happy birthday!
Happy birthday!
For you, happy birthday heart. It's supposed to look like a heart, looks like a circle.
Well, I'm really glad we got to say happy birthday. But I'd like to thank Liam for everything to this. Thank you, my friend, for being here and for answering so many questions so gallantly. You've been wonderful.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, everybody. The chat has been hilarious, and your questions were great. And
good questions.
Wow. Yeah, really, really great questions.
Yeah.
And, it's still sort of a disconnect for me that I'm answering questions along with Alexander because he knows so much more than me. But I will say, Alexander's email after he saw the movie was one of the best professional moments for me. He was just so sweet, and I felt nothing. And it was one of those moments where you always have imposter syndrome, but it went away for an hour. it was a good night. It was like, oh, I'm not an imposter for 65 minutes tonight. Yeah, I just wanted to thank you again, and always love seeing you and talking with you.
Thank you. Right back at you, Liam. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Liam. This has been a blast, and I'm glad you got to enjoy some Tuesday night chaos with us.
Absolutely, the chaos reigns in the Sid City.
Children.
All right, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
I love it. I'll see you again sometime. Take care.